Welcome to Dealer Driven, where the rubber meets the road to success.
Welcome to Dealer Driven. I'm Cameron Wilson.
And I'm Michael Hayes. In today's episode, we're diving into the future of dealership data with Jim Dodd, NADA consultant and digital analytics technical specialist.
We'll explore how AI, customer data platforms, and advanced analytics are transforming the way dealerships operate, helping them optimize marketing, personalize customer experiences, and improve their overall efficiency.
You know, with data-driven decision-making becoming a key competitive advantage, mastering these tools is essential for dealership owners who want to stay profitable and ahead of the curve.
Well, Michael, let's get started. Jim, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's great to be here with you guys.
We're so happy that you're here today. So, Jim, AI is transforming industries everywhere. How do you see it currently being used in dealerships, and where do you see its biggest potential impact?
Well, recently, dealers have been using AI to do basic things like writing descriptions for their vehicles online. They've been using it to edit some of the responses that they may have in emails, and I've even seen it being used now real time for BDC administrators to respond to customers' requests over text and over chat. Going forward, though, AI is going to be really influential, especially in customer data platforms, where the data is going to be able to be ingested into the AI and better used in their marketing efforts.
Well, speaking of customer data platforms, what a great cue that was, Jim. Why is it becoming essential in today's digital landscape to have CDPs, which I'm not sure a lot of dealers really know what a CDP is or does. Could you give us a quick primer on a CDP and what it really does?
Yeah, sure. So a CDP it's really the holy grail of information today. Much like what you would hope your CRM would have done in the past, it really takes all of your information and puts it in one central point. And the beauty of that is that it allows all of the information to be ingested, and it allows it to be managed better so that you don't have replication in multiple platforms throughout the dealership. You know, normally your CRM would have data and your DMS would have the same type of data and they wouldn't talk to each other. So now a CDP is going to allow you a single point of information that when something gets updated, whether it's coming through the CRM or it's coming in from your BDC or it's coming in from the service department, they make an adjustment on the email address or the cell phone. It goes right into a single record, and that's going to make that data that much more efficient for the dealers.
So you mean it could be almost like when I used to order pizzas and they would, or just dial a number and they would tell me everything I did in the last 30 trips that I visited, and if I want the same thing? I mean, we could really do that as dealers now?
Absolutely. And it's funny you bring that up because CDPs are not new. They've been in other industries for years, but they're new to automotive.
So, when you're talking about all the different systems that dealers have, what are some of the most common data blind spots that dealerships face?
Blind spots are really evident in, especially when you look at all of the disjointed technologies that we have today. So a lot of the blind spots that we see are in websites, especially when you go to a website and you have some sort of a framed in application, like you're doing a appraisal tool or you're doing a digital retailing tool. A lot of those areas take you off of the website and give us a blind spot. And we're not able to see that information unless those vendors feed the information. But kind of, going back to what a CDP really does is if you think about unifying all of that customer information into the single platform, that repository is going to be very useful when these other entities become connected. And when you start bringing in information from third-party sites or from texting platforms or from telephony, if you've got all that information going into the CDP, now that information or that content becomes more enriched with all of that influx. I think the big area that we're going to see is in terms of identity resolution. And that's a big area. That's a major blind spot right now. And we refer to that as first-party data. And that first-party data is going to be critical for making a CDP efficient. and especially when you start using AI in it.
Jim, because of all the different sources of data and you say different vendors and everything else, and there's always sometimes disagreements, may be the wrong word, about who owns that data. Why is the dealership ownership of this data so important when you get involved with, well, with any of it for that matter?
Ownership is critical. Data is king. And we've known that for years. And you want to be in control of that data as a dealer, especially when we start getting into what a CDP can do. And you're managing it from the perspective of this is my pot of gold. And I think one of the things that we have to keep in mind is if a dealer is not in charge of their data, and that goes down to their analytics, goes down to their advertising, goes down to the customer data platform, all of that. If they're not in charge of that, then they have less control of how that data can be utilized to benefit their business.
So, Jim, can we step back for a second? You mentioned about first-party data and how important that is. Will you kind of explain that a little bit more for anybody that is listening that maybe, has heard that term but doesn't really understand what it is?
When you're talking about identity resolution, that's putting a script on your website. That's putting it into your telephony system. And now what you're able to do is to identify who that user is online. And one of the biggest disadvantages with this identity resolution is there are two main ways to do it. There is deterministic, which is basically a direct connection that is identical information, cell phone to cell phone, email to email. And that's much more accurate. But then there's also probabilistic. And it means that probably this email or this cell phone belongs to this person. And it's less accurate, but it's still capable of connecting who the users are. And the benefit of that is when a user is online on your website, you're able to identify who they are. The CDP is able to identify who they are. The CDP is going to be able to realize what pizza they ordered the last time and be able to, sort of anticipate what they might want to order this time. So it's huge.
That's perfect. And that leads me right into this next question that I want to ask you. So then how can dealerships leverage AI and CDPs to ensure their marketing dollars are being spent efficiently and reaching the right customers? I think that leads right into that question.
Yeah, if they're leveraging AI is able to learn about consumer behavior. And when that consumer behavior can be brought in and create predictive models, then the engagement with the consumer can be that much better. And it can be at the point in time in which the consumer is ready for that engagement. And I think that's going to be the compelling part of AI and CDPs is that it's going to allow us to be in the moment for consumers, which is a major advantage to what we typically do is the blocking and tackling. All right, I'm going to have advertising out there in the hopes that somebody requests information about what I'm advertising so that I can have my ad presented to you and that you can click on it. But imagine this. Can you imagine if I were going on to a website for a dealer and I wanted to schedule a service appointment for my car? Well, I get halfway through and the scheduler is just becoming too complex and I abandon it. Well, at that point in time, the CDP has recognized me as a previous customer, has identified that I started going down that road and abandoned it. And it makes the decision to now reach out to me via text and say, Jim, I noticed you were looking to make an appointment. Is there anything I can assist you with? It is now starting the conversation without me even completing a scheduling for my vehicle. So I think that's where that AI and that CDP are going to enable us to meet the customer at the intersection that's beneficial for them.
So really get to the point where we truly can deliver personalized information to a customer or handle it very easily.
100%. And not only by doing that am I giving them better communication, but I'm making their experience, their overall holistic experience, that much better. I'm helping to reach them. Think about this. I'm not calling them, I'm texting them because I know that they like to engage via text, or I'm emailing them because they like to do that. My CDP and my AI is helping me understand how my customer wants to be communicated with better.
That's great. With all that data, and we're talking about ownership being so important, but one of the downsides of ownership of data is compliance and privacy. So let's address that just a little bit. What should dealers be doing to ensure that they're meeting the standards, that it is compliant and it is data that we're protecting from other people?
I think CDPs offer a better opportunity for that to be done, mainly because all of the important information, all the PII, is handled within one area instead of being duplicated in multiple platforms out there. So when you think of that, I only have to worry about this one area now. And then that information is going to be utilized to communicate or to work with my vendors when I get into my advertising. So I'm going to be sending information out to them based on that audience only. I'm not taking my whole database and sending it to them. I'm just sending out what they need for their information to get whatever marketing they're going to do. And then that information, if I find that I've got emails going out and I've got a lot of bounce backs, that information is coming back into my CDP and it's going to allow me to update that information. So I think one of the big things when it comes to security, having it in one single place is a huge, huge benefit, especially for the dealers. And again, going back to that, who owns it? The ownership of that data and the location of that data are critical. CDPs offer a great opportunity for compliance. The biggest thing with dealers is that all of this information is now located in a single area. And with that, you're only having to worry about one data point as opposed to multiple data points. But even if you've got vendors that are managing this for you, ultimately, the dealer's going to be responsible for the data security. And I think when you look at how CDPs are structured and using marketing automation platforms to move that information out only in an audience basis, it's going to be a lot easier for them to be able to do that.
It reminds me of my calendar. If I have two of them, how messed up it gets if I don't do it correctly.
Right, especially if somebody else is managing it for you.
Got to keep it all in one spot. So, Jim, this has been really great information. And I know that some dealers are already doing this. What are some of the biggest challenges that you see dealers facing when they integrate AI and CDPs into their operations, and how do they overcome them?
I think one of the biggest areas that dealers have to look at is how do they want this to be? How do they envision a CDP working in their organization? Are they a single point? Are they multiple points? Are they a huge dealer group? How do they envision the CDP not only working in the dealership, but in multiple dealerships and communicating amongst that? One of the big areas that they tend to overlook is they need to have a team dedicated to the development and management of a CDP. And AI is a component of that CDP. So when we look at dealerships, when you start getting into this, identify who's going to be involved in the selection and how they're going to manage it. Decide what you want it to do so that you can start working with vendors that support that and that vision for you. And start with documenting your tech stack. Know who you're using now, who you're using for your CRM, your DMS, your third-party vendors. Know all of that. And then what do you want this CDP to do and interact with that tech stack? And then last but not least, that the methodology in which you're going to look at identity resolution. Which way are you going to go? Right? And that becomes part of your vision, becomes part of your development, because if I'm going to go with something that I want deterministic on, then I need to make sure I'm aligning with the products and the services and the vendors that do just that. And that's going to be a critical element in what my CDP can and cannot do.
I wonder if we'll start collecting pictures of customers as part of their data, first party data we use for identity resolution. Yes.
And the other thing that we can't forget is that you've got to have data integrity, right? So you really have to have a plan for data hygiene, not only when you load the CDP, but as you manage that. So as I was saying before, if I've got a e-blast going out and I have a lot of emails coming back and I'm not updating my CDP, well, I'm really not using it to its advantage. And I need to be doing that. I should have a data hygiene plan in place where when somebody comes in for service, we ask them, is this your current email? Is this your current cell phone? We're constantly ingesting and updating that information so that the way a CDP works is if the data is clean.
I know how much KPIs are so important to 20 Group and KPIs are so important to Academy. So here comes a question for you. What kind of KPIs, indicators should we be looking at to track the effectiveness of a digital strategy? And has that been enhanced by AI and CDP, where you see dealers that are, as you talked about, really starting to put this stuff together to make it more personalized?
Yes, it has. There's a shift that's happening. I mean, the old traditional transactional events that we want to track, the click to calls, the texts, the chats, the emails, all of that is still relevant. But with AI, and especially with CDPs, we have to start looking at touch points. I think that's going to be an evolution over time, is how many touch points via text, how many touch points via email, how many touch points via chat bots, and all of those things are going to become relevant into identifying consumer behavior. I think one of the things that we have to really look at is the way that consumers shop today is way different than what it was even 5 years ago. And the use of technology, the use of mobile, how am I going to be relevant at the intersection that they need me is the goal. So I think KPIs are going to be a difficult thing to sit back and say, if you get so many VDPs, if you get so many this or that, you're going to sell a car. I think it's going to be more difficult than that. It's three-dimensional. It's going to be, how many times am I available at the intersection where they needed my information? That's, I think, going to be the relevant point to start tracking.
Yeah, thank you. So more behaviors and actions than just the final result a little bit.
Yeah, because the internet is especially today, it's a pull technology. I have to request something for the information to be presented to me. Well, if Google or the internet doesn't know where that information is, it won't be able to present it. So our challenge is going to be relevant in all of those queries, using our CDP to recognize that a consumer that does this, this, and this typically does this next. How can I be ready for when they get to that intersection?
Jim, as technology continues to evolve, what steps can dealers take today to ensure that they stay ahead of the curve and fully capitalize on all of this AI, data-driven decision-making, and whatever else comes next from a technology standpoint?
You have to be engaged in it. And Mike, I know that you've been to a lot of these conferences. Cameron, you've been to them. You have to really get involved in these conferences and get out of your comfort zone. There are several of them out there that allow you to learn about CDPs. There's a new book about automotive CDPs that you can get online, and it's just a great guideline for you. But I think one of the hardest things for dealers to do is to get outside of a comfort zone. And that's exactly what you need to do, because this information is not going to go away. This technology is not going to go away. It's going to become more and more a part of your day-to-day business. And you're going to need to have talent in your business. If it's not going to be you, then you need to hire the talent to do it. And obviously, get involved in groups. Get involved in any type of peer-to-peer learning capacity. Get into the academy. Do things that are going to educate you in this
I was just going to say, maybe like one of our digital marketing 20 groups?
Yeah, get into a 20 group. I mean, I always tell the dealers that we can get you on track. You know, if we go in and we do an individual dealer consultation, we'll get you on track. But if you want to stay on that track, then you're going to have people that are living and breathing this every day as your peers. That's where the education happens. The big thing about digital is that it is never a set it and forget it. It is constantly evolving, and the speed in which it evolves increases daily. So when we sit there and say, you know, what we're facing tomorrow was irrelevant today is 100%. And it keeps going that way. And the only way you stay on top of that is to have peers that you can connect with and say, I'm facing this. How do you guys look at it?
You know, you mentioned those conferences. I never, ever had a problem attending one of those conferences and feeling uncomfortable. There's always so much information that's there. It's, as you mentioned, it's so fast and so constantly changing. And, you know, you're free to welcome You mentioned a book on CDPs that just hit. That's a great. You're free to welcome the name of it on this podcast, by the way, if you want to recommend it.
It's Brian Patch, just released it. It's a great book on CDPs. It'll give you all of the basic architecture that you need to be looking at. All the things that we discussed today are in there. And, when I first started learning about CDPs was 3 years ago when I went to the Digital Marketing Strategies Conference.
And I was there with you.
Yeah. And I walked out of there going, oh, wow, this is like, my head hurt. And it makes you realize that why haven't we thought about this? Why are we late to this game? And it's 3 years later that it's just now starting to take off. Why? I mean, 3 years ago, I looked at it and went, that's brilliant.
Well, hopefully this podcast is going to get a whole bunch more people to thinking more about that if they haven't thought about it to this point. So, Jim, thank you so much for all of your insights today. It's really been great to have you on the show. You've given us all of us a wealth to look at, think about.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. It's great information.
Thank you.
That's all the time we have for this episode. A huge thank you again to our friend and guest, Jim Dodd, for joining us. If you're enjoying the show, leave us a rating and review and tell a friend. Once again, I'm Michael Hayes.
And I'm Cameron Wilson. This has been Dealer Driven from NADA. Keep your dealership in drive, and we'll see you next time.